He remained in the downpour, paws firmly on the ground, gaze fixed on a fog-shrouded bridge, unwilling to advance. No barks, no growls, only immobility. Hikers went by, rangers made attempts, but he was unyielding until a newcomer observed an item attached to his collar, an old, rain-drenched photograph of a woman smiling alongside this very dog on this exact bridge. The events that followed would reveal a long-held secret in the woods, a testament to loyalty that transcended time and a connection that would permanently alter a broken man. This narrative is not merely about a dog unwilling to cross a bridge, it's about the reason. And that reason may linger with you long after the tale concludes. For 3 consecutive days, rain had fallen and the forest had absorbed it all like a closely guarded confidence. Moisture dripped from everything: pine needles, fractured branches, even the worn leather boots of Ethan Clark as he navigated the muddy trails of Oregon's Cascade Mountains. The fog lingered low, as if with no intention of dispersing, coiling around tree trunks like ancient sorrow, and sorrow was a sentiment Ethan understood intimately. Retirement had not brought him tranquility, it had merely afforded him more time to contemplate what was irretrievably lost. His brother succumbed to a harsh illness, his wife, gone for 2 years, her laughter now just a faint resonance in the quiet of his cabin. He didn't hike for solace, he hiked to diminish his feelings, less overwhelmed by his own thoughts, less haunted by overly silent rooms. And on this particular morning, as the fog grew denser and the trail more constricted, he arrived at an unplanned destination, a suspension bridge, older than its appearance suggested, spanning a chasm where the wind howled like a premonition. That's when he noticed the dog. It was simply standing there, a German shepherd, drenched, still, and solitary. No leash, no gear, no indication of an owner. Its ears were not erect in alertness but drooped almost beseechingly. Its eyes were not wild but expectant. Ethan slowed his pace. The dog did not flinch. Dozens of hikers had passed, Ethan later discovered, but none had approached closely. The dog neither growled nor barked. It didn't flee. It didn't move. Something about the animal's posture, frozen at the foot of the bridge, refusing to place even a single paw on the initial plank, arrested Ethan. There was no aggression, only a profound presence. It wasn't guarding something, it was tethered to it. Ethan approached with caution, keeping his body low, his voice steady. "Hey, bud," he murmured. No tail wag, no eye contact, just a soft whimper as the dog turned its head slightly and then lowered it, revealing the side of its collar. That's when Ethan saw it. Something was tied around the collar with what appeared to be thin rope and soaked twine. The dog offered no resistance as Ethan reached out, slowly unwinding the mud-caked string. Inside was a folded piece of paper, weightless, a photograph, faded, water-damaged, barely intact. Ethan unfolded it, his hands trembling from the cold and something else he couldn't identify. In the picture, standing on this very bridge, was a woman, smiling, her arm around a boy wearing a cast, and seated proudly beside them, a younger version of the same dog, its ears perked and eyes bright, as if they hadn't yet learned the meaning of waiting. Ethan's breath hitched. The photo looked old, but the emotion it conveyed struck him as if it were happening in that instant. The same backdrop, the same wooden slats beneath their feet. It wasn't a memory, it was this place, this dog, this moment. He crouched lower. "Who are you waiting for?" he whispered. But the dog didn't respond. It didn't need to. Its silence conveyed everything. And that's when Ethan felt it, not fear, not confusion, but responsibility. This wasn't just a lost dog, this was a sentinel. And something on the other side of that bridge, something buried in fog, perhaps even forgotten by people, was keeping it there. Ethan didn't know the story yet, but the look in that dog's eyes suggested it was still living it. So Ethan did the only thing that made sense. He stayed. Not as a rescuer, not as a hiker passing through, but as someone who understood what it meant to stand at the edge of something you couldn't cross alone. And just then, the wind shifted, not significantly, just enough to make the bridge creak, the photo flutter, and the dog take one small step closer to Ethan. Not towards the bridge. Ethan looked down at the photo again and then back at the animal beside him. "I think you're not the only one who's been waiting," he said softly. And somehow in that silent exchange, something shifted, not in the bridge, not in the forest, but in both of them. Because sometimes you don't cross the bridge first. Sometimes you sit down beside what's keeping you from it and wait until the story is ready to let you go. Ethan did not hike back to his dwelling that day. He meandered, more like drifted, through the remainder of the trail, the photograph crumpled softly in his palm and the burden of 1,000 queries weighing on his shoulders. The image refused to release him. That smile on the woman's countenance, so effortless, so vivid. The manner in which the dog nudged the picture before curling up beside it as if it were more than mere recollection. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was loyalty. It was a tether, something sacred, something incomplete. Back in his cabin near Eugene, Ethan positioned the photo on the table, smoothing its corners as if it might divulge its tale if treated with sufficient gentleness. He gazed at it for hours, alternating between sipping stale coffee and observing the wind assailing the pine trees outside. But slumber did not come readily. Not with that stare. Not with that stillness. The dog had not accompanied him, it had opted to remain. At dawn, the sky still adorned with steel-gray clouds, Ethan made the decision he already knew was inevitable. He returned. And as the trees parted once more to reveal that old suspension bridge, Dog was precisely where he had been. Same location, same posture. Only this time, when Ethan approached, Dog's head lifted. There was recognition in his eyes, certainly, but something else as well. Not trust, not yet, but the faintest fissure in the barrier. Ethan did not speak. He did not command. He simply lowered himself beside Dog and sat. Two figures in the rain. No strategy, no ultimate objective, just mutual silence. And in that silence, Dog shifted, just slightly, leaned against Ethan's knee. Not for warmth, not even for comfort. It felt more like acquiescence, as if he were conveying, "You are permitted to be here." What does one do when an animal chooses to admit you into its sorrow? You listen. And Ethan did. That evening, Ethan began to make inquiries. He brought the photograph into town, showing it to the woman at the local ranger station, a quiet, observant individual named Carla who had been employed there for nearly 2 decades. She scrutinized the photo, blinked slowly, and leaned back in her chair as if the air had palpably thickened. There were rumors, she stated. Approximately 5 years prior, a woman had passed through, hiking alone. She had mentioned scattering ashes. Some said she appeared haunted. Some said she never returned. Ethan inquired if a search party had been organized. Carla shrugged with the weary disappointment of someone who had witnessed too many unresolved trails. A few hikers had discovered a scarf by the river, but there was no name, no identification, just someone who had vanished into the woods. He showed her the photo again. Carla narrowed her eyes. "That's the same dog, just younger. You're telling me he's still out there?" "Not out there," Ethan said quietly. "He's waiting." He informed her of the location, the bridge, the posture, the refusal to depart. She turned pale, remarking that others had seen the dog intermittently, always near the bridge, always alone, but no one had ever managed to get close. They referred to him as a phantom, a shadow, a remnant of someone's forgotten narrative. But Ethan didn't believe in remnants, not when it involved devotion of that magnitude. He returned to the trail the following morning. It was colder now, the wind slicing through the forest like fractured glass. Dog was still there. Of course, he was still observing the fog, the bridge, the place that refused to release him. Ethan sat beside him again. No thermos, no leash, just a hand gently resting on his fur. And for the first time, Dog leaned completely in and exhaled. One long, weary breath, as if he had been holding it for 5 years. That night, Ethan couldn't stop hearing it. The whimper, the breath, the wind through the trees. It wasn't noise. It was a message, and whether he was prepared or not, he knew he was a part of it now. Ethan didn't return to the bridge the subsequent day because he desired to. He went because not going felt amiss. It felt like abandoning something or someone that hadn't requested assistance but desperately required it. There's a particular kind of silence that accompanies you when you've witnessed pain you cannot articulate, and that silence clung to Ethan like the damp air hanging low in the valley. This time he brought something warm. A thermos of bone broth, a wool blanket from the back of his truck, and an old hiking pack filled with items he hadn't utilized in years, just in case Dog needed anything. It wasn't charity. It was respect. As he reached the bridge again, he found Dog in the exact same spot. It was almost preposterous how motionless he remained, like a living statue sculpted from grief. But as Ethan knelt beside him, he didn't just pour the broth or utter soft words. He did something far more potent. He simply sat and waited. Minutes passed, perhaps more. Then slowly Dog moved. Not a leap, not a run, just a cautious inch forward. He sniffed the rim of the thermos. Then another step. He drank. That was it. The wall didn't collapse. It cracked. And that crack was sufficient. Dog didn't follow Ethan back that evening. He walked beside him. Not as a pet, not as a burden, but as a being with a history. When they reached the cabin, Dog hesitated at the threshold. Ethan left the door wide open, walked inside, and allowed it to be the dog's decision. It took nearly 20 minutes before paws crossed that line. And when they did, Dog didn't explore. He lay down beside the hearth, not as if making himself at home, but as if still on guard. Ethan didn't attempt to alter that. He watched from the kitchen as the firelight danced across Dog's soaked fur, casting long, distorted shadows against the wood-paneled walls. Every time Ethan coughed or moved suddenly, Dog would flinch, not from fear of Ethan, but from whatever memory still resided in his bones. A reflex not of fear but of defense, like someone who had once had to protect something that never returned. That night, Dog didn't sleep. Neither did Ethan. They just coexisted in the quiet. When morning arrived, Ethan stepped outside to retrieve the paper and found Dog sitting by the door, not to leave, but to watch. He wasn't running. He was observing, protecting something invisible. Days started to merge. Ethan began showing the photograph around more earnestly. He visited the sheriff's office, spoke to a local veterinarian, and checked in with hikers passing through the area. Everyone had seen the dog. No one had seen the woman. No one had answers, but they all had stories. Flickers of sightings, howls echoing through the canyon, whispers of the ghost shepherd who never left the bridge, a symbol of loyalty, of loss. Back home, Ethan stared at the photo again. The woman's smile was not feigned. It was genuine, the kind of joy that doesn't originate from vacation snapshots but from knowing you're in a moment you'll never forget. The same bridge, the same dog, a boy whose face was too obscured to identify. A mystery so personal it felt intrusive even to investigate. But Ethan had made a promise the moment Dog walked beside him. He hadn't spoken it aloud, but it resonated clearly every time their eyes met. "You're not alone anymore." And Dog, slowly, cautiously, began to believe it. He started nudging Ethan when he lingered too long in his thoughts. He stood by the door not to leave, but to join Ethan on the porch, his head resting against Ethan's knee. There was no leash, no commands, just two souls who understood what it meant to wait for something they couldn't name. Then one night, Ethan whispered as he stoked the fire, "I don't know what happened out there, but I know one thing. I'm not letting you carry it alone." Dog looked up. No wag, no sound, just that same intense, patient stare. And that was the night the pact was made. No more one-sided watching. No more silent suffering. They were in this together now, even if neither of them fully understood what this was. For a dog that had spent years in the same location, Dog didn't behave as if he were lost. He didn't wander, panic, or pace. He possessed a stillness that unsettled people, a kind of presence that made you feel as though he knew things, as if he were perpetually listening for something the world had ceased to articulate. Ethan observed it more each day. Dog had started eating normally, even responding to soft whistles, but he never barked, never played. His joy seemed suspended, as if held hostage by something no one else could perceive. And the bridge, Dog wouldn't go near it, not even from a distance. His entire body would stiffen, ears back, tail low, as if the air around it grew too heavy to breathe. Ethan couldn't let it go. He wasn't the type of man who pursued phantoms, but something about Dog made the silence feel alive. It made not knowing feel personal. So he did what no one else had. He kept asking. At the ranger station, tucked behind a wall of faded maps and forgotten complaints, Ethan found a fragment of something. An old field report from 5 years ago, handwritten and barely legible. It referenced a lone female hiker. No name, no emergency contact. She had spoken to a ranger briefly about scattering ashes. Nothing alarming. But what stood out was a second note attached loosely with a paperclip. It read, "Howling reported near Cascade Overlook. Non-stop 2 nights after hiker last seen. That spot less than a mile from bridge." Ethan's heart thumped with a strange rhythm. Part adrenaline, part fear, part something unnameable. He copied the coordinates and headed back home, his fingers tracing the frayed edges of the photo again. At sunset, he and Dog returned to the bridge. But this time, Ethan tried something different. He brought the photo with him, not in his pocket, but in his hand. He walked slowly, knelt down, and laid the image on the first plank of the bridge. Dog approached cautiously, nose twitching. He stared at the picture for a long time, his eyes flicking between the woman's face and the shadows of the trees beyond the bridge. Then, without a sound, he lay down next to it. And that's when it happened. Dog let out a sound Ethan hadn't heard before. Not a growl, not a whimper. A low, rumbling bark, brief and sharp, like a warning or a memory too urgent to stay buried. He rose suddenly, nose to the wind, eyes locked on the mist ahead, and then another bark, louder, trembling with something primal. Ethan looked around. Nothing moved. No birds, no breeze. But Dog wouldn't stop barking. He barked into the fog as if trying to awaken something or someone. It didn't feel like fear. It felt like protest. Ethan crouched beside him, placing a hand gently on Dog's back. His muscles were coiled tight, legs rigid, chest heaving. It wasn't just noise. This was language, a call, a memory echoing forward. The next morning, Ethan pulled out the coordinates from the ranger's report. He traced them on an old map pinned above his workbench. They pointed toward a steep section of trail near the canyon rim, an area mostly closed off now due to erosion. He studied the map while Dog sat by the window, eyes fixated in the direction of the bridge, tail still. Something was buried out there, not just a story, purpose. And Dog, with every breath, every watchful moment, was leading Ethan toward it. Certain trails seemed to await your arrival, not with blossoms and sunshine, but with a breathless quietude, as if the very earth has been holding its breath for an excessive duration. That is precisely what Ethan experienced as he followed the coordinates from the ranger's report. The trail was overgrown, partially consumed by moss, and entangled in roots, as if nature had deliberately attempted to conceal it. A sign near a bend read, "Caution, unstable overlook. Closed." But it might as well have proclaimed, "Truth ahead. Enter at your own risk." Dog led the way without hesitation, not rapidly or frantically, but with determination, nose to the dirt, ears twitching at every breeze. His body communicated more eloquently than any bark. He knew this place. Ethan followed closely, his boots crunching against the damp earth, his hands trembling from cold and anticipation. Every turn in the trail felt imbued with a memory not his own. Then Dog stopped. They had reached a narrow ridge where the trees thinned and the land sloped steeply toward a collapsed overlook. Nature had been eroding the edge for years. Railings were gone, stones had tumbled into the canyon below. But Dog stood perfectly still, staring at a moss-covered post just to the left of the trail. At first, Ethan saw nothing remarkable, just wood, worn and weathered. Then Dog circled it once, then again, pawing gently at the base as if attempting to extract something from the earth itself. Ethan knelt, brushing the moss aside. What he found was barely visible, a name carved faintly into the post, worn down by time and rain. And just beneath it, a crude set of coordinates, different from the ones on the ranger's note. These weren't printed, these were left like a trail of breadcrumbs fashioned from whispers. Ethan didn't hesitate. He called his friend Leia, a local land surveyor and someone not easily unnerved. Within an hour, she arrived with her GPS unit and that no-nonsense energy only women who have hiked solo for decades can possess. They followed the second set of coordinates deeper into the woods, off-trail, past fallen trees and deer tracks. Dog never strayed more than 2 steps ahead, occasionally pausing, looking back, then continuing. It was as if he wasn't leading them to a place, he was retracing something lived, something sacred. Finally, they reached a clearing surrounded by trees so tall the light barely penetrated. Dog stopped again and began to dig, not wildly, but with focus, precision. Not play, purpose. Ethan dropped to his knees beside him. The earth here was softer, disturbed once long ago, and then left to settle. After minutes of digging, something hard clinked against his fingers. Metal. It was a rusted tin container wrapped tightly in fraying rope and sealed in plastic sheeting that had almost turned to dust. With hands shaking, Ethan opened it. Inside were water-stained journal pages, a handful of old photographs, and one folded note addressed in all capital letters, "To whoever finds this." The weight of it settled on Ethan's chest before he read a single word. Dog sat beside him, eyes locked, not on the box, but on Ethan, as if to say, "You're the one who came. You were meant to." Leia remained quiet. She knew this wasn't the kind of discovery you celebrate. Ethan took the container and cradled it as if it might disappear. It wasn't evidence, it wasn't treasure. It was a message smuggled out of silence. And the only reason it had survived was Dog. Ethan sat at the edge of his dining table with a space heater humming in the corner and a silence that had grown thick and sacred. The box rested in front of him like an unopened truth. Dog lay nearby, head on paws, eyes trained on the tin container as if bracing himself for something he had already lived through once. Ethan took a breath, peeled back the plastic wrap, and opened the weather-worn lid. The smell of earth and mildew wafted up, but inside, miraculously, the note was intact, folded in quarters, ink smeared in places, but still legible. He carefully unfolded the pages, each one brittle but powerful in its presence. The handwriting wasn't rushed, it was steady, like someone had written these words knowing they might be their last chance to speak. It wasn't just a diary, it was a breadcrumb trail of a woman holding her breath in plain sight. I thought I'd have more time. I thought being careful would be enough. The words hit like punches in slow motion. She wrote about hiking alone, not out of rebellion, but necessity. She spoke of grief, of ashes carried in a silver tin, of a promise made to a man she lost before anyone knew he was sick. But between the lines of heartbreak was something else. Fear. I don't know his name. He never gave it. He just started showing up. First on the trail, then in the parking lot, then by the ranger cabin. I thought maybe I was imagining things until I wasn't. Ethan's hand clenched the edge of the table. His breath caught on every other line. If something happens, I've trained Dog to stay. I know he won't leave. Not until someone kind enough listens. The phrase rang like a bell inside his chest. Across the room, Dog shifted. Not stirred, not stretched. Shifted like he heard her again. She detailed a pattern. Encounters too deliberate to be coincidence. A man who always stayed just far enough away to deny malice. Just close enough to deny peace. She mentioned filing a complaint with a local ranger. No one followed up. Nothing official was logged. Just a woman alone, holding a secret the world didn't believe she had the right to be afraid of. Ethan's mind reeled. He remembered Carla's offhand comment about the missing woman. The one scattering ashes. The one who just vanished. But now the vanishing didn't feel accidental. It felt planned, or worse, ignored. Beneath the note were photographs. A few of the bridge, a blurry one of a second dog, possibly a sibling to Dog, fur lighter, eyes just as alert. And at the bottom of the tin, a folded park map marked with an X, the same one Ethan had followed days ago, and scribbled next to it in ink. If someone finds this, he's still out there. Ethan dropped the paper. The heater buzzed louder. Dog stood up. Not walked. Stood rigid. Head up, ears forward, body aimed toward the front window. And outside, nothing. But that's the thing about instincts. They don't wait for proof. They respond to patterns. And Dog was vibrating with recognition. Ethan moved slowly, peering through the curtain. A dark SUV he didn't recognize sat idling at the base of his long driveway, just past the gate. No headlights, no movement, just presence. He didn't panic. He didn't run. He stepped back, locked the door, and looked at Dog, who was still staring out the window as if he'd seen this vehicle before. Because maybe he had. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in the corner of his cabin with the box, the note, and a dog whose silence had become the loudest thing in the room. Outside, the fog rolled in thicker than usual, pressing against the cabin like a question waiting to be answered. And in that tension, Ethan finally understood something. Dog hadn't stayed to remember, he'd stayed to warn. Ethan had always regarded paranoia as something afflicting individuals with excessive free time. As it happens, it feels considerably less like fiction when the same dark SUV materializes twice in 2 days without headlights, without movement, merely existing. It hadn't reappeared the previous night, but Ethan couldn't dispel the oppressive atmosphere since it vanished down his drive. It didn't drive away. It receded like a tide pulling back just enough to conceal the next wave. Dog hadn't touched his food that morning. He stood rigidly by the front window, body alert, ears forward, prepared. Ethan poured himself another cup of stale black coffee and observed him from the kitchen. The moment he moved toward the front door, Dog tensed as if muscle memory had activated. His eyes weren't scared. They were locked in, focused on something beyond the treeline. Something Ethan couldn't see, but he now trusted without question. The sheriff came, but the report barely carried weight. Unmarked SUV, he shrugged. Could be a tourist. Could be some teenager playing mystery man. But when Ethan handed over the note from the woman, when he shared what he'd found, he saw it. That flicker in the officer's eyes. Recognition, concern, and hesitation. "We had a ranger go missing that same season," the sheriff muttered, eyes low. "Didn't leave a note. Didn't say goodbye. Just stopped showing up." Ethan asked the name. The sheriff paused. Jonah Cray. Not a name in the note. But Ethan remembered Carla mentioning someone she didn't trust. Someone who filed half-hearted reports. Someone who didn't follow up. Cray. The name echoed in Ethan's skull the whole drive home. It stuck like splinters. That night, the cabin was different. Ethan kept the lights off, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Dog stayed closer than usual, his eyes scanning every movement, every creak of wood. And when Ethan stepped outside for air, he didn't have to look far. There it was, parked just behind the trees, the SUV. This time closer, this time deliberate. Ethan didn't flinch. He grabbed a flashlight and walked toward it. But the moment he clicked the beam on, the headlights flared to life and the engine growled low. Then, like a ghost changing its mind, it peeled backward and disappeared into the woods. Not a word, not a threat, just a message, "I'm watching too." Ethan knew what came next wouldn't wait. He packed his bag in silence, grabbed the photo, the note, the map, and he looked at Dog. "We finished this." Back to the trail, to the bridge, to the place where everything froze. The fog came early that evening, thick and wet, swallowing the trail until the trees looked like bones stretching from the dirt. Dog led the way again. Pause, careful, silent, practiced. At the bridge, they paused. The photo had been tied to Dog's collar again, laminated this time as if protecting it somehow protected her. Dog didn't look at the bridge. He looked at Ethan, then veered off the trail, cutting into the forest along a slope they hadn't explored before. They moved fast as if time had narrowed to a single path. 10 minutes in, Dog stopped, staring down at a cluster of rocks half-sunk in mud. A structure maybe now crumbled. Ethan brushed aside debris and roots until he found it, an old backpack. It had been there a long time. Inside, a wallet, a cracked phone, a small knife, and tucked beneath it all, bones, long, brittle, half-shattered. Not animal. And resting against the bottom of the bag, a second collar, lighter, smaller. The tag read Scout. Ethan sat back on his heels. The wind moved through the trees like a sigh. Dog didn't cry. He didn't whine. He stepped forward, touched the collar with his nose, and sat beside it. Not to grieve, to guard it one last time. There are some truths that don't shatter, they settle quietly like dust after a collapse. And as Ethan knelt beside the remains tucked beneath time and roots, he didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just listened to the stillness, to the way Dog stood motionless, body facing the collar as if it deserved the kind of reverence humans forget to give each other. Scout. That was the name etched into the tiny silver tag. The other dog in the photo, the one who never made it back. The sheriff didn't ask many questions when Ethan called it in. Just a heavy pause and then, "We'll handle it carefully." They confirmed what Ethan already knew in his bones. Human remains, long decayed, matched the timeline. Unidentified, but close enough. And beside the body, a ranger park badge buried beneath the pack, cracked and dulled with time. Jonah Cray. The truth didn't explode, it exhaled. The silence wasn't absence, it was a cover-up. And Dog never moved far from the spot. Even when they came with gloves and kits, he stood his ground as if finishing something. Not a ritual, a duty. The next morning, Ethan printed the photo again. This time in full color, laminated and tied neatly to Dog's collar. They stood together at the edge of the bridge where it all began. The same fog pressed against them. The same planks creaked in the wind. But the weight was different now. The fog no longer whispered, "What if?" It simply asked, "What's next?" Dog stepped forward. No hesitation. One paw, then another. The old boards didn't protest, they accepted each step with a groan, not of burden, but of memory being honored. Ethan followed behind, careful not to rush, letting Dog set the pace. Halfway across, Dog stopped, not frozen, reflecting. The photo on his collar fluttered in the breeze, the woman's face barely visible beneath the plastic. Then Dog looked up into the fog and let out a sound that wasn't a bark or a howl, but something between, a long, soulful breath of noise that reached beyond the trees. It didn't echo, it settled like a name being called home. And just like that, he kept walking. Ethan followed, breath caught in his throat, heart pounding like a memory trying to outrun itself. When they reached the other side, Dog turned around, looked back just once. Ethan knelt beside him, hand resting on his shoulder. "You waited until someone listened," he whispered. "You can stop waiting now." They stood there for a long while. The bridge didn't collapse. The trees didn't tremble. The world kept turning, but slower, as if it understood the weight of what had finally crossed. Back at the cabin, Dog curled beside the fire for the first time, head resting on Ethan's boot. He didn't stay alert. He didn't stand guard. He slept. And in that moment, Ethan understood. This wasn't just Dog's journey, it was his too. Not one of solving a mystery, but of learning what it means to show up for someone without expecting anything back. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't running into danger, it's staying beside someone who refuses to move until they're finally ready to walk through the fog with you.